Welcome, friend, to a journey across time and tide. Tonight we drift into the world of Viking longships, where life and labour intertwined beneath vast, silent skies. As the ship's hull creaks and the sea's breath drifts across the deck, you'll find yourself immersed in the steady pulse of an ancient voyage. Along the way, we'll explore the quiet demands of a cook's daily toil, the whispered secrets of a jarl's table, and the lingering sense of salt and smoke that defined meals at sea. Our pace will remain gentle, our narration measured, inviting your mind to wander with each rolling wave. Feel the soft cadence of uncovered histories wash over you like a lullaby of wind and wood. Let the rhythm of far-off fjords greet your senses, easing the tension of the modern world. With every word, imagine the hush before dawn on a long ship, and the warm glow of a kettle brimming with heated oil. Rest easy, for this calm passage will guide you gently through the first segment of our tale. Picture yourself on the heaving deck of a langskip, its wooden boards slick with sea brine. Your woolen tunic clings damply to your skin as an icy spray dances across your arms. The vessel sways in a slow, rhythmic lurch that echoes the pulse of the open ocean. In your hands is a churn fashioned from whalebone, its surface polished smooth by generations of cooks. The spindle rises and falls in a steady motion, demanding strength you did not know you possessed. You drive the beater into a wide, iron-bound pot, its lip nicked by years of pounding. Every turn of the handle sends a surge of golden fat rustling within the container. The oily sheen glints under a grey sky that stretches unbroken to the horizon. Each breath you take is infused with the sharp tang of brine and the faint, lingering warmth of rendered blubber. You feel the cold seeping through your boots, lodging in your bones with each cresting wave. A low groan rises from the hull as the longship meets another swell. You grip the churn's shaft harder, countering the deck's unsteady tilt. Your knuckles blanch where leather meets bone, a steady ache radiating through your forearms. In the background, warriors shift their weight, the clank of iron greeting your ears like distant thunder. You hear the soft whisper of timber contracting and expanding under the sea's weight. Salt drops from the rigging above, plinking onto the churn like tiny bells tolling a muted hymn. Your breath forms small clouds that vanish instantly in the cold air. The pot's interior, once slick and translucent, grows opaque with the thickening oil. You peer into its depths, watching ribbons of fat swirl in a slow current. A sheen of foam gathers at the edges, stubborn bubbles that refuse to settle. Feel the strain in your shoulders as you push the spindle down for another cycle. A shiver runs through you when a rogue wave crashes over the rail, snatching your footing. The churn wobbles and you brace yourself against the iron rim to steady both tool and body. Your heart thumps in your chest like a war drum, a reminder that every moment demands vigilance. Yet your mind drifts briefly to a quiet hearth, where firelight flickers against a stone hearth. You taste the faint memory of fresh bread on your tongue, a fleeting comfort lost to the sea. The ancient craft beneath you murmurs with the tales of countless voyages. Each roll of the deck feels like a verse in a saga you never intended to join. You wonder how many tides will carry you back to solid ground, if ever. The churn resists you now, its weight compounded by the gathering fat that clings to every surface. Your fingers, stiff with cold and grease, fumble briefly before finding purchase once more. You pivot your body, pressing your heel against a timber joint to anchor yourself. A guttural voice from the stern calls for more oil in the cooking pot, its tone edged with impatience. You meet the gaze of a burly warrior passing by, his helmet tilted back to reveal a flicker of curiosity. The deck shudders under the thunk of a fallen water barrel somewhere aft. You steel yourself, knots of tension gathering in your shoulders. Slowly, deliberately, you begin another cycle of revolution. The churn's handle moves in a fluid arc, echoing the longship's embrace of the waves. Beads of sweat mix with salt spray on your brow, forming a gritty paste. You swallow hard, the taste of iron lingering on your tongue. A gull's cry cuts through the hush, a solitary note in the vast expanse of grey. You attune your movements to the rhythm of the sea, hoping for a moment's reprieve. Each turn of the spindle feels like both blessing and burden, a cruel testament to necessity. The whale oil thickens still, its transformation from viscous liquid to buttery reserve almost complete. You glance at the iron bands encircling the pot, imagining their silent strength in containing the precious yield. In the corner of your vision, ropes sway against the mast, strings of shadow dancing in the wind. Your arms tremble with the effort, the burn of exertion matching the chill of the air. You lock your jaw, refusing to let fatigue dictate your pace. The surface of the oil ripples like a dim mirror, reflecting the somber sky above. You press the churn's shaft downward once more, committing to the task with steady resolve. A low vibration hums through the deck as the longship cleaves through another swell. You feel a gentle warmth spread from your shoulders to your torso each time the spindle turns. The whale oil, destined to become the backbone of every meal aboard, begins to settle into a smooth reservoir. You inhale deeply, the scent of aged blubber mingling with the clean air of the open sea. In that moment you glimpse the weight of your duty pressed upon you by the Jarl's unspoken demands. Your hands move of their own accord, a practiced dance performed under the endless sky. You catch your reflection in a drop of oil lost on the deck, noting the strain etched in your eyes. The world narrows to the churn, the pot, and the endless roll of the ocean around you. One final push carries you to the brink of completion, the whale oil now a golden reserve shining against the iron pot. You release the handle at last, muscles slackening as you exhale, the longship's gentle motion rocking you in a lull that promises only another dawn of labor. Imagine yourself leaning over a small, scuttled barrel by the mast. The coarse barley inside is damp and clumps together in heavy lumps. Your fingers brush against the grain, scattering stray kernels like muted stars across the deck. You scoop handfuls into a wide cauldron, its iron belly echoing soft thuds with each dropping grain. A low hum of the Langskip's timbers blends with the gentle pulse of the ocean beneath. Steam rises from the cauldron in wisps that carry the faint, earthy scent of salvaged supplies. In the next barrel, you uncover dried fish, its skin mottled and brittle from weeks at sea. You handle each piece delicately, mindful of the fine threads of bone concealed within the frayed flesh. A thin slice tears free, revealing a dull grey interior that seems to absorb the light all around it. The cook's knife glides awkwardly, pressed by the ship's motion and the stiffness of salt-cured meat. You drop the pieces into the bubbling barley gruel, watching them soften into something more recognizable as food. Around you, the crew murmurs in low voices, their breath mingling with the rising haze. The scent is a blend of old grain, brine, and something faintly metallic that makes your stomach clench. You steady the cauldron with one hand while stirring with the other, the long spoon carving slow curves in the mixture. A soft, rhythmic beat matches the rocking of the vessel, lulling you into a trance of repetitive motion. Despite the chill air, a bead of sweat trickles along your brow and slips into your eye. You blink once, twice, as the harsh salt stings before you rub it away and return to your task. The warriors gather near the rail, their bulky forms outlined against the grey horizon. You estimate the count, 60 hungry bodies awaiting their portion, each more imposing than the last. A sudden creak reverberates through the deck as the ship lurches over a hidden swell. You lean into the motion, adjusting your balance to keep the cauldron from toppling. In a moment, the gruel sloshes against the rim, and you catch wayward droplets on your tunic's cuff. The thick paste clings to fabric, its weight a stubborn reminder of necessity. Far off, gulls call in mournful harmony, their cries lost in the expanse of open water. You scoop a ladle of gruel into a wooden bowl and carry it toward the nearest warrior. He snatches it without a word, lifting the vessel to his lips with a practiced ease. A single sip triggers a wince. The bland mixture slides down his throat in reluctant gulps. You imagine the luxury of fresh milk and barley porridge beside a warm hearth as a fleeting dream. Across the deck, another warrior inspects his portion and shakes his head in silent disapproval. The scuttlebutt travels swiftly, whispers of discontent that ripple through the crew. You catch a glimpse of a jarl's retainer, posture rigid, expecting more substance in the rations. The steward's glare slices through the haze, urging you to fill the cauldron again without complaint. You return to the burners, refeeding the flames with bundled twigs and tinders pressed between metal clamps. The wood crackles in a dull chorus, sending tiny sparks swirling upward, where they vanish into mist. You hover over the fire, feeling its faint warmth at the small of your back. A shift in the breeze carries a new note, the sharp tang of unwashed bodies and the sourness of sweat. You recall that the chamber pot at the stern has not been emptied in days. The memory brings a subtle ache to your nostrils as you turn back to the cauldron. In the bubbling mixture, small fragments of fish float like pale driftwood. Each scoop feels like a negotiation between what is edible and what lingers dangerously close to waste. You remind yourself that survival often demands compromise far harsher than this. A splatter of gruel lands on the deck, and you hasten to scrape it into the cauldron before it hardens. In that moment, the longship's length feels both confined and boundless, a paradox of wooden beams and endless sky. You pause to gather your thoughts, inhaling against the backdrop of roaring water. Your lips taste the residue of old salt, a constant reminder of where you stand. Nearby, one of the warriors mutters a prayer to Heimdallr, seeking favor for better provisions. You nod in acknowledgement, though your prayers are quieter, meant for a safe return rather than abundance. The Mife, as some call you among the ship's few caretakers, works silently yet ceases only briefly. You imagine the hush of a cottage kitchen where fresh porridge bubbles in peace and laughter drifts from the hearth. But here, the ocean is your roof, and the stars your dim lanterns. You scoop another ladle, this time adding a handful of seaweed to mask the gruel's blandness. The ribbons of kelp drift like emerald tendrils in the dark liquid. Your heart lightens at the subtle change, hopeful for a moment of acceptance among the crew. The ladle swings back toward the waiting line, a small offering in a world defined by scarcity. And so you continue, day melding into night under the steady sway of the longship, an unbroken cycle of preparation and provision. You rise with the dawn's first pale light, though the horizon remains a uniform slate. Your legs protest beneath your woolen trousers as you step over a coil of rope. A fresh breeze carries a hint of salt onto your face, mixing with the stale scent of last night's gruel. You make your way toward the central galley, mind alert for the skew of the deck. Each plank beneath your boot feels younger than the weathered beams you passed moments ago. At the cauldron, you note the thin layer of scurvy green mold forming around the rim. A stir with your long-handled spoon dislodges flakes that float atop the simmering liquid. The odor is reminiscent of wet straw left to rot in a leaky barn. You hold the bowl at arm's length, allowing the breeze to carry away the most pungent fumes. Warriors gather, their breath heavy with the sour tang of unwashed skin. You recognize a grim acceptance in their eyes, a silent pact that this is the world you all share. A shout from the Jarl's steward reminds you that timidity has no place here. You lower the ladle and brace your feet against the grain of the deck. Balancing the bowl demands the focus of a tightrope walker beneath the mast. The man who receives your offering sniffs suspiciously before swallowing the gruel in deliberate sips. Behind him, two others lean on crutches fashioned from driftwood and rawhide. Their swollen eyes and bleeding gums speak of scurvy's slow progress. You think of the cloves you traded for in a distant market, now nearly gone. Each pod was a treasure more valuable than a silver coin. You stir another handful of stale grains into the pot, hoping to stretch what remains. The wood beneath your hand is smooth from years of similar ministrations. You recall a time when barley husks were a treat, not a chore. The longship shudders as an unexpected swell tilts the deck violently. You stumble, letting go of the spoon before catching it by the handle. A splash of gruel arcs across the planks, landing in a dark patch that will soon harden. The warriors watch with neutral gaze, accustomed to spills and losses. You exhale slowly, allowing your racing pulse to find its rhythm. Steam hugs your face in thin tendrils, a fleeting warmth in the chilly air. You lean forward, pressing your elbows onto the cauldron's iron lip. A teammate sweeps aside a puddle of urine that crept from the chamber pot overnight. The sour stench lingers, an unwelcome companion to every breath. You fight the urge to retch, focusing instead on your next motion. The long ship's slatted floor vibrates beneath you, a constant hum of motion. You witness a small group of seagulls wheeling overhead, their plaintive cries echoing in the void. You glance at the horizon, where sky and sea blur into a single grey sheet. There is comfort in the monotony of colour, a soothing sameness that dulls distraction. You ladle another portion, careful to include a shard of dried fish for protein. The flesh is stringy and faintly salty, but it yields nourishment you cannot deny. You imagine the crackle of a hearth fire and the taste of fresh meat baked amidst herbs. Here, that dream stays just beyond your reach, like a star on the darkest night. You hear the scrape of oars against wet wood as some warriors haul supplies on deck. A hefted axe thuds into a timber beam nearby, and you step back, mindful of the weapon's keen edge swinging in cramped quarters. Their voices are low and constant, a rolling murmur beneath the ship's song. A slip of the hand sends your ladle clattering against the iron pot. You freeze for a heartbeat, expecting an outcry that never comes. The Jarl's shadow passes by, his cloak whispering across the planks. You sense his impatience in the tight curl of his brow. You lower your head and continue, neither rushed nor relaxed. Each motion is deliberate, measured as the beat of a distant drum. The cauldron empties slowly, each scoop a reminder of the day's labours. You wipe your brow with the back of your hand, smearing soot and sweat in equal measure. A thin mist descends as evening approaches, coating surfaces with moisture. You gather the last dregs of grain and fish, stirring until nothing clings to the pot. The quiet hum of the crew dwindles as they return to their stations. You scrape the cauldron clean, the iron ringing sharply in the silence. Your hands tremble slightly from exhaustion and hunger alike. You set the pot aside and step back, surveying the galley's sparse remains. A sense of small triumph warms you briefly amidst the cold. The longship continues its course under the endless sky. Your work may be unseen by many, but it is the lifeblood of this floating village. And as night falls around you, you prepare for another dawn of ceaseless toil. Picture this. You lean over the steaming pot of watery stew on the longship's deck. The vessel rolls beneath you with a gentle unpredictability. Warriors weave around you like shadows in a dim hall. Their axes rest against timber posts or are slung across wooden frames. The crest of each wave sends a sudden lurch through the whole structure. You find your feet shifting, a subtle ballet of balance and caution. Each step is measured, each moment demands attention. The ladle in your hand arcs toward a waiting bowl held by a burly figure. His gauntleted hand grips the wooden rim as though it were wrought iron. A stray elbow from a passing shield scrapes your elbow. You inhale sharply against the mix of steaming broth and brine. The steam carries hints of fish oil and salted meat, tempered by the smoke of damp wood. A blade chisels through the air, as a warrior hoists his oar for the next shift. You watch the polished shaft slice past your shoulder by inches. A muted clack of iron on wood echoes across the deck. Your heart skips, but your hand remains steady. The ladle pours its lukewarm contents with deliberate grace. You sense the expectant hush that falls over the crew. Each warrior stands poised like a statue carved from cold stone. The silent pact of survival hangs heavy in the salt-scented air. You transfer the bowl to the next in line, whose gaze appraises the meager stew. Above you, the rigging shivers with every breath of sea wind. You pivot on your heel, avoiding the broad face of an oar thrust forward. A shard of early morning light glints on the steel axe head near your elbow. You bend slightly, letting the curve of your back cushion the blow that never comes. Warriors' footsteps drum across planks, forging a low, rhythmic chorus. The deck's slight slope is both friend and foe to your practiced steps. You keep your eyes on the horizon to anticipate the longship's next tilt. A bowl clatters against iron beneath you, startling a gull that wheels overhead. The ladle dips into the pot for another measure of stew. You breathe in time with your motions, a calm anchor against the vessel's sway. Each act of service is a prayer for safe passage and full bellies. The crew's patience is finite, their grumbling a soft percussion. You murmur a quiet apology into the fog of steam. Your voice is small but carries across the empty spaces between warriors. A sudden shift in balance sends a wave of broth surging toward the gunwale. You twist swiftly, corralling the liquid back into the cauldron's iron arms. The warriors watch with respect and silent relief. In their eyes you find acknowledgement of the dance you perform. Each bowl you fill is a victory over chance and chaos. The edges of their cloaks flutter like banners in a muted wind. A distant clap of thunder hints at storms to come. Yet here and now, you hold dominion over this small domain. Your mind slips briefly to a scene of quiet countryside, but the longship reminds you how far you have traveled. You step back, giving space for a warrior to pass with his oar. The polished wood grazes your thigh, sending a shiver through you. You fold into the motion, letting the oar guide your next move. Then you return to the cauldron, an unbroken cycle of service. The deck beneath your boots is worn smooth by countless feet. Each scuff and groove tells a tale of voyages past. You run a thumb across the edge of a plank, feeling its history under your skin. You lift the ladle for one final pour before the meal ends. A hush falls as the last bowl is passed along the ranks. The warriors nod in silent appreciation, their hunger momentarily sated. You set the ladle aside, fingers trembling with fatigue and relief. A breath escapes you, caught between exhale and exultation. The longship tilts gently, rocking you in a cradle of wood and sea. You bow your head, acknowledging another successful day. In the calm that follows, you ready yourself for the next challenge. As the final embers of the hearth fire dim beneath the pot, you stand with legs steady against the deck's sway. Your eyes scan the horizon, where sea meets sky in a seamless shade of steel. In your hand, You hold a bundle of worn rags for cleaning the cauldron's iron sides. Each swipe of cloth sends a whisper of ash drifting into the salty air. Warriors have begun stowing their empty bowls, the wooden vessels tucked beneath benches or hung from pegs. The deck is alive with muted movements, a quiet murmur of relief that the meal has concluded. You breathe in the scent of damp wood mingled with the lingering taste of fish oil. A faint breeze carries the woody fragrance of carved shields and burning tinders. Under your tunic, your heart slows in response to the lull of settled duty. A low chant of song drifts across the deck as one of the warriors begins a simple refrain. His voice is soft, a humble tribute to Heimdallr as dusk approaches. You feel the weight of your service settle into your bones like ballast. Your fingers trace the cauldron's rim, feeling every groove worn by seasons of use. You gather the rags and fold them with care, placing them in a wicker basket beside the pot. The wicker's strands press into your palm, a gentle reminder of woven craftsmanship. A gull's distant call resonates above the creak of rigging. Your gaze follows the bird's flight for a moment before returning to your task. Nearby, a warrior wipes his mouth with a scrap of cloth, moving with deliberate slowness. In his slow exhale, you sense satisfaction and exhaustion intertwined. You lean forward, steadying the basket while another sailor lifts the cleaned cauldron. The vessel's iron edges brush against your forearm, cold and unyielding. You step aside, allowing him to carry the pot toward the storage hold. The longship groans as it rides a gentle swell, rocking you in its wooden cradle. You feel the caress of motion beneath your boots, a rhythm that demands both attention and ease. Above, the mast's shadow drifts across planks like a silent sentinel. A soft glow of evening light filters through low-hanging clouds. You pull your cloak tighter against the chill that settles with dusk. Your shoulders relax as the wind shifts, carrying warmth from the ship's stern. Somewhere below, the steward rattles chains as he secures barrels of grain. The clatter echoes through the hull, a punctuation in the hush of closing day. You close your eyes briefly, letting the sound ground you. In the stillness behind your lids, you recall a hearth fire's crackle and the comfort of dry earth underfoot. A soft call from the Jarl's steward summons you forward. You step toward the forward deck with measured steps. He stands with arms crossed, eyes reflecting the dim glow of falling light. You feel a twinge of apprehension at his stern gaze. Then he nods once, granting silent approval of your work. Relief washes through you, warm and unexpected. You allow your shoulders to drop as you bow your head in quiet thanks. The moment feels like sunlight breaking through a veil of cloud. Around you, the crew settles into a calm rhythm of post-meal tasks. Some men polish their axes with ragged scraps of hide. Others murmur shared recollections of distant lands and old battles. Their voices rise and fall like waves upon a distant shore. You step back to the galley's edge, watching embers fade beneath the cooking hearth. The heat lingers, a faint reminder of the day's demands. You fold your arms and lean against a weathered post. Your cloak's fabric rests softly against your cheek. you feel gratitude for the simple luxury of stillness. Here, under the bleak sky, even moments of quiet feel profound. The sea's steady heartbeat drifts through the planks, lulling you in its unending cadence. In the hush between breaths of wind, you hear the world hold its breath. A soft spray of brine kisses your face, sharp and refreshing. You open your eyes to the expanse of darkening water. The Longship glides onward, carrying both you and your memories of home. As night fully envelops the voyage, you stand ready for the next dawn's stirring tasks. Your work may be ordinary, yet it sustains the extraordinary lives around you. In this unbroken cycle of labor and service, you find a peculiar kind of peace. And as the stars emerge overhead, you whisper a quiet promise to endure with grace. For tomorrow, as today, you will rise again to feed both body and spirit. Imagine the drakkar carving through the North Atlantic spray under a pale sky. Picture yourself perched at the bow as the ship's prow slides over dark water, each crest and trough leaving a gentle thrum in your bones. Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, gave his orders with a calm voice that belied the icy air swirling around him. He had been raised in the fjords of Iceland, acclimatizing to frosted decks and the whisper of winter winds. Now he stood at the helm of a fleet bound for Greenland, seeking land that his father had glimpsed across the horizon. The scent of brine was ever present, mingling with the tang of dried cod and the faint smoke of tar used to seal the planks. Each breath you took felt crisp, almost sharp, as if the very atmosphere contained shards of frost. The sky overhead wore a leaden shade, and low-hanging clouds threatened to release a flurry of fine, powdery snow. You could almost taste the cold, a metallic edge at the back of your throat that reminded you of winter nights by a hearth long extinguished. Waves rose and fell in a steady cadence, rocking the drakkar in a manner that the crew accepted as the heartbeat of their journey. The oarsmen, clad in thick woolen cloaks, dipped their blades in unison, their rhythmic toil echoing across the horizon. Imagine the relentless embrace of the sea, its vastness refusing to relent even at the touch of human hands. The timber hull creaked softly, a reassuring murmur that spoke of years of craftsmanship and salt-seasoned resilience. Above deck, a handful of sails billowed in the wind, their coarse flax fibers rattling like distant bells. You felt a kinship with the drakkar itself, both vessel and companion, guiding you toward an unknown shore. Days passed beneath a veil of mist, each sunrise a muted glow, and each sunset a slow dissolving ember. On one frigid dawn, the lookout spotted jagged silhouettes in the distance, white cliffs carved by glaciers and time. Relief and trepidation intertwined as you realized the promise of land would soon be fulfilled. As the fleet crept closer, shards of ice drifted alongside, glinting like scattered crystals in the dim light. The water grew dappled with floes, and the air carried an ancient chill that seeped into marrow and memory alike. Leif ordered the anchors down in a sheltered fjord, whose steep sides offered some respite from open waters. The fjord's stillness was profound, as though the world held its breath, save for the subtle hiss of melting ice. Imagine the hush of this new land, broken only by the soft crepitation of thawing shards tumbling into frigid depths. The crew stepped onto rocky shore, their boots sinking into damp turf and frost-hardened soil. An undercurrent of wonder moved among the men, tempered by the knowledge that Greenland's promise came with hardship. Within days, they erected sod houses, simple longhus with roofs of layered earth and timber, walls thick against the merciless cold. The aroma of peat fires warmed the entryways, offering fleeting comfort from the sting of brisk winds that searched every seam. You could hear the low murmur of voices speaking in Old Norse, shaping plans to sow barley and raise sheep in this icy frontier. Yet the soil resisted their efforts, clinging to frost beneath a thin veneer of fertile topsoil that vanished in the first frost. Imagine the frustration when sprouts failed to emerge or wilted under a pale sun that never warmed enough. Some men took to hunting seals on nearby ice floes, their breath condensing in ghostly plumes as they crept toward haul-out sites. The crack of a rifle echoed like a distant thunderclap, followed by a tense silence as seals slipped back beneath the waves. Every successful catch was a small triumph, the rich oil rendered into tallow for candles and cooking. Despite these victories, scurvy crept through the ranks, its subtle onset marked by swollen gums and lethargy. Picture the concern in Leif's eyes as he offered sprigs of angelica and wild sorrel, local herbs thought to ward off the affliction. The bitter taste of sorrel tea lingered on the tongue, but its presence brought hope when the crew's strength faltered. Some nights, whiteout conditions descended without warning, reducing visibility to mere arm's length. The landscape became a blank canvas, as if the world itself had forgotten its own contours. And still, the men persevered, guided by Leif's quiet determination and the ancient compass of his conviction. You sensed a tension between youthful optimism and the stark reality of an Arctic winter that would test every resolve. The sagas speak of Leif's confidence, an unshakable belief that cultivated land and thriving settlements lay beyond the ice. Archaeological evidence, however, tells a more cautious tale of isolated farmsteads and limited harvests. Imagine the contrast between the golden fields described in oral tradition and the stunted barley found in excavation layers. In those remnants, you glimpse the flicker of dreams meeting the harsh logic of survival. Over time, the Jarl's overconfidence revealed itself in dwindling supplies and strained alliances with local tribes. The skrælingjar watched from a distance, offering pelts and bows in cautious trade, their curiosity matched by careful assessment. When trade faltered, tensions arose, though outright conflict was rare under Leif's steady, measured rule. The salted wind carried the scent of spruce resin from driftwood beached at the fjord's mouth. It mingled with the iron-rich tang of blood when hunts yielded caribou, reminding all that life here demanded constant vigilance. Imagine the looming decision: press on deeper into the ice or return to familiar shores before winter's full fury. Leif gathered his council within a sod-roofed hall, the fire's amber glow dancing across carved wooden beams. His voice, calm and resolute, weighed the scant successes against the mounting threats. And in that moment, you felt the weight of leadership settle like snow on a cedar bough, beautiful and burdensome all at once. With the promise of spring still distant, Leif chose to secure the settlement and await resupply from Iceland. The decision echoed the rhythm of prudent navigation, a reminder that discovery often lies in measured retreat as much as bold advance. As the wind howled outside, you could almost sense the silent pact between man and landscape. That survival required both courage and restraint. As winter tightened its grip on the fledgling Greenland colony, the days grew shorter and the light more elusive. Each sunrise arrived as a pale glow on the horizon, barely piercing the thick veil of clouds. The air carried a damp chill that settled into the bones, making every breath feel deliberate. Smoke from peat fires curled into the low ceilings of the longhus, bringing a faint, earthy aroma into the cramped interior. Leif Erikson watched over his people with a steady gaze, pondering the challenges that lay ahead. The men and women huddled around the fire, their breaths rising in gentle plumes of steam. They spoke in hushed tones, recalling tales of home and sharing hopes for warmer days. Outside, the wind roared through narrow gaps in the turf walls, sounding like distant thunder. Snowflakes drifted in swirling patterns, coating the ground in a soft, muffled blanket. The crunch of footsteps on frozen grass echoed like a distant drumbeat whenever someone ventured outside. Imagine the stillness that followed each footfall, as if the world held its breath between heartbeats. Leif consulted his maps and saga scrolls by the dim light of a burning torch. The parchments bore inked runes that spoke of past voyages and legendary discoveries. He traced routes with a gloved finger, weighing tales of rocky coves and hidden bays. A sense of purpose guided his decisions, tempered by the gravity of his responsibilities. The settlement's livestock, bundled in furs, huddled in sheltered pens against the frost. Sheep bleated softly through gaps in woven barriers, their breath visible as tiny clouds. The clink of metal rang out briefly when a herdsman checked the iron clasp of a gate. Salted fish hung on wooden racks, their skins taut and stiff under the cold. Leif's men carved notches into the beams to mark each day's scarce catch. Supplies from Iceland had dwindled to the last few hides and sacks of grain. With spring still weeks away, the settlement risked falling into famine's shadow. Relief came when scouts returned, with word of driftwood deposits further north. They spoke of spruce branches and pine boughs washed ashore, offering warmth and building material. Imagine the relief that surged through the colony upon hearing of these gifts from the sea. Leif organized a small party to gather the timber, wrapping their hands in leather mittens. The crunch of ice underfoot accompanied their measured steps toward the shoreline. Each felled branch released a fresh scent of resin, sharp and invigorating. Back at the camp, carpenters fashioned support beams for the longhouse roof. The new timber snapped into place with a solid thud, promising sturdiness against future storms. Inside the hall, a hushed reverence settled over the workers as they admired their handiwork. Leif's voice broke the silence with instructions to store extra lumber for ship repairs. His calm authority grounded the settlement, much like the trees anchored the coastline. As the days slipped by, murmurs of spring persisted like a soft refrain. The The promise of Thor lingered in the faint warmth that crept into midday air. Scouts reported patches of exposed moss, a verdant sign amid the white expanse. Women gathered handfuls of the green shoots to brew with dried berries and seaweed. The resulting broth had a tannic bite that warmed the chest and lifted spirits. Leif himself sampled this bitter tonic, nodding in approval at its restorative power. In moments of quiet reflection, he contemplated the saga of his ancestors. Tales of Eric the Red's bold temperament echoed in his mind like a distant horn. Yet Leif's strategy mirrored a different path, one of measured discovery rather than reckless conquest. Each decision balanced the thirst for new lands against the imperative of survival. He knew that tales of Vinland would follow only if Greenland endured. When the first thaw arrived, trickles of water whispered along the eaves of the longhus. Icicles dripped rhythmically, creating a gentle, percussive soundtrack to the thaw. The ground softened underfoot, releasing the scent of hidden earth beneath the frost. Perspective shifted as the colony prepared to sow its first seeds in earnest. Leif oversaw the tilling of narrow plots where barley and rye might take root. The soft, dark soil felt hopeful between gloved fingers, a tangible promise of life. Traders from Iceland sailed into the fjord with fresh provisions and news of home. Their arrival brought a burst of colour in red-dyed wool cloaks against the grey landscape. Crates of salted mutton and barrels of mead lined the shore, filling the air with savoury and sweet scent. Leif stepped forward to greet them, his cloak damp from the thawing breeze. The exchange of goods reaffirmed the fragile bond between distant settlements. Above all, the colony breathed anew with a cautious optimism that only the promise of spring can bring. Picture the summer sun perched low on the horizon, casting a golden haze across the fjord as Leif dispatched envoys ashore to seek contact with the skrælingjar. Their boats touched the pebbled beach with a muted thump, sending a fine spray of brine onto the sand. The shoreline was dotted with driftwood shelters where native families had huddled through spring rains. You can almost hear the crackle of fires behind the woven reed walls as curious figures emerged. The skrælingjar carried bows carved from yew and wore garments dyed with fish oil that gleamed in the sunlight. Their language rolled through the air in lilting tones that contrasted with the clipped cadence of Old Norse. One of Leif's men held aloft a cloak dyed deep blue, hoping to signal peaceful intent. The native children peered from behind their parents, eyes wide with fascination. Imagine the tension that quivered like a taut bowstring between two worlds meeting for the first time. Trade commenced slowly as trinkets of polished amber and metal knives exchanged hands. A sense of diplomacy settled over the gathering, delicate as a spider's silk web. Spices from the east, once destined for distant courts, passed into calloused hands in exchange for finely tanned pelts. The musky scent of seal fur drifted through the air, mixed with the sweet smell of drift flowers that grew along the water's edge. Each gift carried weight beyond its material value, a bridge between cultures carved by mutual curiosity. Leif observed with a steady gaze, aware that every gesture could tip the scales between harmony and conflict. You could sense his cautious optimism as he extended a wooden cup of mead to a local leader. The amber liquid reflected the low sun, and when the native chieftain sipped, his eyes lingered on the small bubbles traversing the surface. A hush fell as trade goods filled baskets woven with rushes, their curved lines echoing the shape of the coastline. The skrælingjar showcased intricately carved ivory amulets that glistened with water-polished sheen. In return, Norse craftsmen displayed belt buckles shaped like twisting serpents and brooches stamped with interlacing designs. The cerulean glaze on a ceramic bowl caught your eye, its sheen reminiscent of the ocean you had just crossed. Despite the language barrier, gestures sufficed to convey respect and mutual interest. Yet underlying the cordial exchange was a wary assessment of unfamiliar strengths and needs. Some Norse warriors stood on the periphery, hands resting on the haft of an axe, ready should diplomacy falter. You almost felt the undercurrent of tension like distant thunder before a summer storm. When one misstep occurred, a dropped knife glinting on the stones, the skirmish was averted by swift apologies and offerings of extra cloth. This small act of contrition smoothed over the moment, reaffirming the fragile peace. Imagine the relief that settled in the marrow, a quiet sigh echoing across generations. As midday heat lifted, the parties relocated to a nearby glade where wild mint and sweetgrass perfumed the air. Leif's envoys shared bread baked in iron pots, the crust yielding to reveal a tender crumb. Native women brought out baskets of cloudberries, their tart flavor surprising the Norse palate. The collision of tastes was another layer of this cultural exchange, each bite a new revelation. Overhead, gulls wheeled in lazy circles, their calls punctuating the conversation like natural punctuation. You could almost feel the rhythm of their wings mirrored in the ebb and flow of negotiations. Trade meetings stretched into evening, the cooling air washed by a fine spray from the fjord. Torches flared to life, their flicker painting dancing shadows across the vessels grounded on the shore. Amid this play of light and shade, the two peoples found unexpected kinship in survival's shared challenges. Both sought shelter from the capricious weather, warmth in uncertain times, and sustenance from scarce resources. The Norse offered technical knowledge of metalworking, demonstrating how to temper an iron blade by plunging it into whale oil. In return, the skrælingjar guided them to hidden caches of driftwood, suitable for building frames. You could almost trace the lines of understanding forming in the air between gestures, glances, and shared tasks. When night fully fell, the Norse and natives gathered around a campfire ringed by stones. The heat from the coals seeped through layers of fur, providing a respite from the crisp night air. Flames licked upward, illuminating carved faces etched into wooden logs. Leif rose to speak, his silhouette framed against the leaping flames, and offered a simple greeting in a borrowed phrase of the skrælingjar tongue. The response came as a warm murmur, a rhythm of acceptance that resonated in the hush that followed. Stories were exchanged of sea serpents and ice giants, of ancestors who first set foot on these shores. You could feel the lineage of imagination weaving through each narrative, uniting past and present. In those stories, the boundary between Norse saga and native legend blurred like dawn mist. The crackle of logs lent a gentle percussive beat to the spoken words. When silence returned, it was comforting rather than empty, a testament to the bonds being built. Morning found both groups parting ways with gifts of gratitude, beaded necklaces and bundles of cured fish. Leif watched the native canoes slip into open water, their paddles leaving soft wake patterns behind. The word scar from skrælingjar sounded in his mind, wild ones as some sagas term them, but the reality was more nuanced. You sensed that these encounters would shape the future of Greenland more than any decree from afar. The next season would hinge on mutual respect and the lessons learned on that pebble-strewn beach. As Leif returned to the settlement, his heart carried a mixture of satisfaction and foreboding. He knew that goodwill could ebb like the tides, retreating at the first sign of mistrust. Overall, the skaldic undercurrent of this alliance spoke to the unpredictable nature of human connection. You can almost sense the delicate balance, the fragile promise of coexistence etched into each gesture and exchange. The thawing earth revealed patches of sod that settlers coaxed to life. They tilled narrow strips of soil by hand, using wooden ard tilting devices with iron tips forged back in Iceland. Each furrow turned under stiff clumps of clay, its dense texture resisting every push of the blade. Imagine the frustration growing with every ounce of effort spent on the reluctant ground. Seeds of barley and rye, imported at great cost on a sturdy gnar, were scattered by careful hands. Yet when rains came, the young shoot struggled against waterlogged roots and late frosts that lingered into June. You might sense the collective sigh when sprouts blackened at dawn, killed by a sudden snap of cold air. The longhus stood silent as farmers returned empty-handed, their breaths swirling like ghostly threads in the doorway. Leif Erikson convened his council beneath the low beams, eyes reflecting both hope and concern. He listened as men recounted their trials, blighted fields, algae-choked irrigation trenches, and flocks that failed to thrive. The aroma of damp wool cloaks lingered in the drafty hall, a reminder of the cold that refused to retreat. On a clear afternoon, scouts climbed nearby hills to inspect hidden gullies where warmer microclimates might protect seedlings. From that vantage, the landscape stretched in rolling mounds, a mix of moss, lichen, and exposed rock. They found pockets where earth held warmth, shielded from frigid gusts by natural stone walls. Enthusiasm flickered anew as teams prepared to transplant young shoots into these sheltered nooks. You can almost feel the cautious optimism as gloved fingers pressed each green spear into forgiving soil. Days passed and some shoots endured, but most succumbed to the ever-shifting weather. Tiny tendrils snapped under the stress of late storms, leaving empty rows that spoke of hopes dashed. In sagas, this land appeared abundant, with fertile fields and enduring harvests. Archaeological layers, however, paint a more subdued portrait of meager yields and seasonal retreats. Excavations reveal shallow plough marks and scattered grain husks too sparse to feed a thriving community. Imagine comparing the glowing accounts of the skalds to the quiet, chalky residue left in a peeling pit. The contrast between oral tradition and ground truth felt as stark as daylight against the flicker of a torch. Leif's confidence wavered when he received reports of soil acidified by permafrost melt. He ordered samples sent back to Iceland in barrels, hoping learned men might interpret the seaborne samples. But the journey west had cost precious grain. and little remained to sustain their experiment. Local herbs like angelica and seaside cow parsnip offered some relief when hunger gnawed at bones. Their bitter roots boiled into mush that tasted of rain-drenched earth and fleeting comfort. Women ground these roots between stones, their rhythmic motion a balm against despair. Children listened to whispered stories of home, where barley fields swayed beneath a warmer sun. Some dreamt of returning, a hum of longing echoing like a half-forgotten lullaby. Leif gathered his family in the longhus, sharing meager portions of fish and broth. Each mouthful carried the tang of ocean salt and the weight of unspoken decisions. He spoke gently of perseverance, reminding them that Landnam was never easy. The hearth fire glowed low, its warmth paling against the damp chill that seeped through the walls. Outside, seals barked in the twilight, their calls carrying across ice floes like messages from another realm. With renewed resolve, farmers prepared stone-lined troughs to channel meltwater away from crops. Terraces formed along slopes, each level a step toward taming the rugged terrain. Imagine the slow satisfaction of water sliding gently through channels, carrying life rather than flood. Yet every innovation met a cost: more labor, more strain on lean bodies, and precious daylight stolen. When autumn arrived, a handful of heads of barley stood tall amidst rows of empty furrows. The harvest was scant, just enough to bake flat cakes that broke with a hollow crack. Children nibbling those flat cakes found them dense as river stones and nearly flavorless. Still, each crumb carried a story of resilience, of hands that refused to yield. Leif weighed this meager bounty against the approaching winter, calculating its potential to sustain. Mounds of driftwood provided fuel, yet time itself felt a more precious commodity. He recorded every detail in runic script, his hand steady even as doubt crept inward. The Saga of Greenland was no simple tale of conquest. It was a living chronicle written in sweat. Some men, emboldened by necessity, turned to hunting seabirds among rocky ledges. The Kerreruk nests offered eggs rich with sustenance, their shells brittle against nimble fingers. The scent of bird oil and guano lingered in the nostrils, a sharp contrast to the milder aroma of dried fish. When bird feathers drifted into the longhus, they spoke of one more source of warmth and comfort. Leif's overconfidence surfaced when he suggested trading for surplus grain from skerries further south. The journey to those islets required navigating narrow channels, slick with tidal currents. Some feared the voyage would mirror the perils of the deep ocean, with waves crashing over low prows. Yet Leif's assurance prevailed, and a party set out at dawn to test his hypothesis. They returned weeks later with scant grain and eyes haunted by near drownings in hidden whirlpools. Their stories of rogue currents and overturned skiffs tempered Leif's optimism with a sobering dose of reality. By candlelight, he listened in silence, the flame flickering against his furrowed brow. In that hush, you sensed the realization that discovery often demands a reckoning with pride. Imagine the sea under a sallow sky as Leif Erikson gathered his vessels at anchor near the western promontory. A biting wind carried the faint brine of open ocean, its chill seeping through layered woolen cloaks. The waves rolled with measured persistence, each crest low enough to seem almost friendly before it curled into motion. In the hulls, crew members stoked peat fires, their breaths rising in thin plumes against the cold. Leif stood at the rail, scanning the horizon where icebergs gleamed like distant lanterns. He believed the weather would hold until spring, trusting instincts honed by years of northern voyages. The men spoke in subdued tones, leaning into the steadiness of the longships beneath them. Yet under that calm surface lay a tension, as if the ocean itself awaited a signal to awaken. On a crisp morning, Leif ordered the sails raised for a foray to gather timber farther west. You can almost feel the weight of that decision pressing upon him, a burden tempered by both experience and ambition. The sails snapped into place with a sharp crack that echoed across the water. Oars were drawn and set in unison, the rhythmic dip and rise, a heartbeat guiding the boats onward. Clouds overhead darkened as if drawn by some unseen force, blotting out the sun's pale glow. The men continued their course, trusting their leader's assurance even as the sky grew ominous. Raindrops began to spatter on deck, each impact soft but insistent against timber and tar. You might sense a flicker of doubt among the crew, a question whispered beneath the roar of wind. The lookout called a warning when a low bank of fog drifted toward them like a living veil. Visibility shrank to arm's length, and the world became a sphere of damp, grey uncertainty. Leif shouted orders, his voice steady though his heart quickened with the storm's approach. Sailors scrambled to lower sails and secure rigging, breath ragged in the cold air. The longships lurched as gusts struck broadside, sending sprays of icy sea mist over the rails. You can almost taste the salt and feel the sting of droplets settling on your cheeks. Waves pounded the hulls in growing succession, each strike a reminder of nature's might. Leif grasped the helmsman's arm, guiding the ship's bow into the wind to ride out the tempest. Inside the hull, water pooled at the lowest planks, seeping through worn seals in a slow, relentless drip. Crew members bailed with wooden buckets, their muscles burning as they fought the rising tide. The roar of wind and sea became a blur, a single great force demanding surrender. In that moment, you would sense how overconfidence can blind even the most seasoned navigator. The storm raged for hours, its fury paling only as fatigue stilled the wind's momentum. When dawn finally broke, a fragile light revealed battered ships and weary faces. Leif reviewed the damage in silence, noting splintered timbers and torn sails. He felt the weight of responsibility settle coldly in his chest. A sense of relief mingled with regret as he realized how close they had come to catastrophe. The men worked jury-rig repairs using spare planks and hidden caches of rope. Each knot tied and each patch hammered into place carried the imprint of survival. You could almost hear the quiet determination in their labored movements. Leif convened his council within the shelter of a rocky cove, its walls rising like silent sentinels. Flickers of torchlight danced across their faces as they recounted the night's ordeal. He spoke softly of lessons learned, his tone measured yet tinged with humility. The crew nodded, their trust renewed by his acknowledgement of fallibility. News of the near disaster spread to the settlement, carried by envoys in soaked cloaks. Women and children listened with wide eyes to tales of how the sea, had tested their protectors. In the Longhus, stories transformed fear into reverence for the sea's unpredictable nature. Leif's saga grew richer for this trial, not diminished by the scar of failure. Archaeologists today uncover remnants of these storm-battered vessels, their timbers etched with salt and strain. The contrast between saga and soil reveals a leader who steered his people through peril with cautious resolve. You might imagine the echo of that night's wind still whispering along the Greenland coast. In the years that followed, Leif tempered his ambitions with a deeper respect for the elements. His experience became guidance passed down in quiet counsel to future voyagers. Though his dreams of Vinland still lingered, he understood that pride alone cannot chart a safe course. Each voyage thereafter carried the imprint of that storm under low, sullen skies. The memory of ordering sails raised in the face of gathering fog remained a cautionary refrain. It bound him and his crew to the rhythmic pulse of sea and sky, a pact between man and world. Only by acknowledging missteps could he ensure the promise of discovery would not become the toll of ruin. Such is the measure of overconfidence, a lesson carved in wood and water, carried in each cautious breeze. Beneath a verdant hill in Vestfold County, you discover the silhouette of a burial mound, its gentle curve suggesting a secret hidden for more than a millennium. Imagine yourself kneeling before the Oseberg mound, sunlight filtering through slender birch trunks overhead, highlighting faint lichen patterns on rough stone. In 1904, Norwegian archaeologists Gabriel Gustafsson and Håkon Shetelig began to unearth this sleeping vessel with hushed reverence. A soft breeze carries the scent of damp soil as wooden planks emerge, each timber whispering tales of a long-lost voyage. The ship, built around AD 820, rests in near-perfect condition, its curved prow still intact after more than 11 centuries beneath the earth. Archaeological teams worked with a careful rhythm, brushing away layers of peat with brushes made from reindeer hair. As you trace the grain of the oak timbers, you sense a constant hum of history resonating beneath your fingertips. Among the ship's timbers lay 2 female skeletons, their identities still shrouded in mystery, sparking debates among scholars. Some historians propose they were high-ranking priestesses chosen to escort a noble leader into the afterlife. Others suggest they might have been the Jarl's daughters, buried to honor family ties and dynastic power. The radiocarbon dating of the oak timbers confirms a date near AD 834, aligning with the late Viking Age's flourishing artistry. Excavators discovered lavish grave goods beside the hull, including a finely woven wool tapestry whose geometric patterns remain vivid. A carved wooden cart stood nearby, its small wheels and iron fittings hinting at ritual processions. You can almost hear the soft creak of those wheels on a damp forest path, carrying sacred offerings to the mound. Delicate bed frames, ornate chests, and wrought iron tools complete the tableau, each object chosen with precise intention. The carvings on the prow and stern teem with stylized beasts, serpents curling into knotwork and birds poised in mid-song. These motifs reflect a Viking belief in the interconnectedness of land, sea, and sky, As sunlight fades, the wood takes on a honeyed glow, illuminating carvings that once gleamed in flickering torchlight. You sense the soft echo of a skald's chant in this silent chamber, honoring those laid to rest long ago. Archaeologist Chetelig recorded each detail in meticulous sketches, ensuring that no symbol would fade from collective memory. Gustafsson's notes reveal the precision with which timbers were fitted together, without nails, using overlapping planks known as clinker construction. This technique allowed the hull to flex in storm-tossed waters, a silent testament to Viking ingenuity. Imagine yourself listening to the cadence of oars resting in those same timbers, poised for departure at dusk. The discovery of the Oseberg ship deepened our understanding of seafaring funerary rites and elite status. Scholars still debate the symbolism of the intertwined animals, some seeing protective guardians, others envisioning mythical companions for the afterlife. Anna Stein Ingstad's later work on Norse sites complemented these findings, linking Scandinavian exploration to the wider North Atlantic world. Conservators in Oslo carefully treated each plank to prevent decay, using gentle sprays of polyethylene glycol to stabilize the wood. Today the ship is displayed beneath a low-ceilinged hall, its timbers preserved in temperature-controlled air. Visitors pass in hushed tones, guided by a path that circles the vessel, offering different perspectives of its graceful curve. You can almost sense the anticipation in those ancient eyes when the hull first touched the water, carrying warriors and cooks alike toward unknown shores. It is easy to forget the shadow of death that accompanies such journeys, but the Oseberg ship reminds you that even the most sumptuous voyage ends. The intertwined knotwork seems to pulse under the soft museum lights, beckoning you to trace its lines with quiet awe. A rusted blade and a small silver bowl suggest offerings poured by hands long since returned to dust. Every inch of this vessel speaks of a culture that revered craftsmanship and believed in an afterlife as real as the world outside. The absence of written records leaves space for imagination to wander amid the salt-crusted timbers. Imagine yourself drifting on calm seas, lulled by lap against wooden sides and soot from burning pine needles rising like pale smoke. The texture of the carved shields now resting on walls beside the ship once felt coarse beneath gloved hands. You might sense a lingering resonance in the air, as though the mound itself remembers ancient rites. Modern archaeologists still return to Oseberg, employing ground-penetrating radar to search for adjacent burials. Their instruments hum softly, mapping residual soil disturbances that hint at secondary mounds. In lecture halls, students pore over Gustafsson's field diaries, uncovering new connections between grave goods and Scandinavian iconography. A small fragment of a horse's bridle, found near the stern, points to the animal's symbolic role in funerary processions. You can almost hear the distant crack of hooves on frozen ground, guiding the noble dead to their final resting place. Some muse that the ship once sailed beyond the North Sea, glimpsing Orkney's stark cliffs before turning home. Whether myth or fact, the story underscores a Viking thirst for exploration and ritual grandeur. The Oseberg discovery also inspired a generation of Scandinavian artists who incorporated its motifs into modern design. Wandering beneath the ship's iron rivets and carved panels, you feel the weight of centuries pressing gently upon your shoulders. Yet there is no sense of oppression, only a gentle reminder of human longing to be remembered beyond a single lifetime. A final glance at the prow reveals a creature's head, its eyes once inlaid with bone or glass, now dark but still watchful. You stand in silent companionship with those ancient souls, connected by a shared moment of hushed reflection. The echo of centuries reverberates here, floating on the still air like a whispered invitation to dream. In this muted hall, you drift between past and present, carried by the steady pulse of collective memory. The Oseberg ship remains a silent storyteller, its wood speaking softly of voyages, rituals, and the enduring human quest for meaning. You step away, heart quieted by the resonance of ages, ready to journey on through our tapestry of Viking life. Picture the gentle curves of the ship as you step closer under the low roof, the timbers arching overhead like the ribs of a great creature resting in repose. The inscriptions carved into the prow may seem subtle at first, but each swirling line once held symbolic power, connecting life and death in equal measure. Over 1 century of study has revealed that these knotwork patterns follow precise geometric rules, likely communicated through oral tradition among master carvers. In 1915, dendrochronologist Olaf Anderson matched tree ring patterns in the hull timbers to a felling year of 821-823 CE, offering an exact window into the shipwright's craft. Allow your mind to drift over the elaborate iron rivets holding overlapping planks together, each head hammered flush to the wood, preventing moisture from seeping between seams. A modern team from the University of Oslo's Cultural Heritage Conservation Lab applied laser scanning in 2018 to create a digital replica, preserving every knot and groove. Consider the slender fragments of silk, woven with golden threads, once lining a ceremonial gown placed in the burial chamber alongside other precious fabrics. When you examine the textile fragments under glass cases, you notice faint traces of plant dyes, likely woad and madder, used to achieve deep blues and reds. Beneath the silks lay a small gaming set carved from bovine bone, perhaps intended to entertain the honored dead on their final journey. It is easy to overlook this afterthought beside heavy chests and beds, yet this tiny board game speaks of moments of lull between battles and banquets. As you lean in, you might spot indentations where pawns once rested, the board's edges worn smooth by countless strategic plays. A scholar like Dr. Ingrid Norman has argued that these games served as metaphors for fate's unpredictable paths. Picture the feeling of awe when finding a set of 3 carved wooden boxes, nested within one another, each secured by iron clasps. Their interiors once held ritual oils used to anoint both living and dead, imbuing the voyage with spiritual significance. In the quiet hush of the museum hall, you may overhear guides recounting how the box's design mirrors beliefs in layered realms of existence. A delicate sleigh runner discovered near the bow likely transported food offerings through snow before the burial rites took place. Archaeologists theorize that the Jarl's cortege traveled on this very sled, weaving through forest trails to the mound's clearing. You can almost sense the crunch of frost under horses or hooves and sea banners dipping in the winter's low sun. Consider also the traces of barley and oats found under the stern, evidence of funerary feasts conducted before sealing the tomb. Pollen analysis performed in the early 2000s by botanist Kari Lund reveals that these grains were mixed with juniper berries, creating a bitter gruel. This final banquet must have tasted of pine resin and earth, a reminder of the cycle between nourishment and decay. When metal detectors first beeped near the ship's keel, conservators paused, fearing modern contamination. Instead, they uncovered a small silver brooch of intricate design, likely a personal token of the buried noble. Allow your gaze to follow the flaring shoulders of that brooch, enameled in shades of green that once caught torchlight. X-ray fluorescence analysis confirmed traces of copper and tin, hinting at trade networks stretching to continental Europe. These artifacts form a tapestry of life beyond the battlefield, revealing domestic routines alongside martial exploits. Consider the way each object was placed with intention, like ingredients measured for a precise recipe. The Oseberg burial can be seen as a supreme feast, where death and celebration intertwined in ritual harmony. While brushing away peat, excavators recorded pollen from yarrow and mugwort, plants associated with protection and purification. Envision that same fragrance rising from a cook's cauldron, stoking hearth fires in longhouses far from these mounds. Here, though, the scent was buried and preserved, a botanical time capsule for those who came later. Researchers still debate whether the two women were related by blood or bonded through spiritual office. DNA analysis in 2019 provided partial sequences, but high humidity and microbial activity degraded many samples. That uncertainty leaves space for each visitor to weave personal stories into the archaeological record. Envision tracing the ship's outline on a frosted window, connecting past voyage to present reflection. The ability to perceive these details rests on painstaking work by conservators who stabilize each fragment. Further studies led by Professor Henrik Kolstad in 2022 examined microscopic wear on oarlocks, indicating frequent use at sea. The pattern of abrasion suggests this vessel navigated both calm fjord waters and open ocean swells. A shallow coral stain on one plank indicates contact with seawater, rich in marine life, perhaps near the Shetland Islands. Consider how each scuff and blotch holds a memory of salt spray and wind-driven sails. The Oseberg find reshaped our understanding of gender roles in Viking society by highlighting these women's elevated status. Art historian Leif Erikson has noted that their elaborate attire parallels depictions of goddesses in later Norse sagas. When you study the figural motifs, hearts and tendrils emerging from animal heads, you glimpse a harmony between human and beast. That harmony echoes tensions you know from living aboard a cramped longship, where kinship and conflict coexisted. Even the smallest buckle or ring strap carries implications of wealth, power, and ritual obligation. A quiet hum drifts through conservation labs as specialists monitor humidity and light, preserving the timbers for future generations. In this setting, the boundary between past and present softens, like twilight lingering on the horizon. No grand pronouncements are necessary. The artifacts speak through their form and context. The voices of excavators past resonate in archived photographs, sepia-toned glimpses of workers in period attire. Reflect on their methods, picks, saws, and carriage lanterns illuminating sparse winter days. Their dedication bridges a gap of more than 1,000 years, connecting you to a shared human endeavor. A final glance at the ship's keel, now supported by steel cradles, reminds you of conservation's silent effort. That keel once rode waves toward unknown lands. Now it anchors memory in a tranquil gallery. As you step back, the hush of reverence remains, guiding you onward through our story's unfolding chapters. Here, history lies not in pages but in living wood and metal preserved for your quiet contemplation. Under the vaulted ceiling of the exhibition hall, the Oseberg ship's fragmented artifacts rest in silent alignment. Archaeologists have meticulously catalogued each item, assigning them unique accession numbers to preserve context. Among these finds, a cast iron cauldron stands out, its curved rim worn smooth by centuries of use. Envision yourself tracing the cauldron's handle, its blackened surface hinting at open fires and boiling broths. Residue analysis performed in 2015 detected traces of animal fats and barley starch, confirming its use as a cooking vessel. Feel the gentle pulse of discovery as tiny shards of ceramic bowls are examined under magnification. Each sherd reveals fine grooves where a potter's fingers once coaxed clay into shape. The presence of Arctic char scales embedded in grain residues suggests a varied diet that included freshwater fish. Notice how the interplay of tools and ingredients mirrors the daily toil of a Viking cook at sea. A bone spoon, its handle carved into a stylized animal head, rests beside the cauldron, evoking ritual and routine. Radiocarbon dating of that spoon places its origin around AD 825, consistent with the ship's construction. A modest set of copper fishhooks hints at provisioning strategies during extended voyages. Archaeobotanical studies led by Dr. Solveig Christensen recovered carbonized barley kernels from a sealed container. Those kernels, now darkened by charring, still retain their husk patterns under a scanning electron microscope. The discovery of blackberry seeds mixed with oat grains points to seasonal foraging practices. Trace amounts of seaweed found in soil samples convey the Vikings' resourcefulness on rocky coastlines. You might sense a quiet cadence in the curator's footsteps as they adjust glass lids to reduce condensation. The hush of the gallery makes each visitor acutely aware of the artifact's fragility. Behind the scenes, conservators clad in white gloves monitor environmental sensors, ensuring stable humidity. A recent experiment reintroduced controlled moisture cycles to study wood swelling and contraction. Those tests revealed microcracks that are otherwise invisible to the naked eye. In the conservation lab, you could glimpse replicant timbers soaked in synthetic resins to test preservation methods. The parallels between restoration work and the original shipbuilders' water-resistant techniques are striking. That clinker-built hull employed overlapping planks to keep bilge water at bay, a design echoed in modern boat building. As you walk past the display cases, let your mind drift to the distant winter nights when crew members huddled around similar vessels. Archaeometry reports show elevated lead levels in ceramic glazes, indicating trade routes that carried raw materials across the North Sea. Trade beads discovered alongside burial goods came from as far as the Byzantine Empire. Those glass beads in hues of cobalt and emerald provided a vivid contrast to the muted autumnal textiles. You might trace the patterns in preserved wool fragments dyed with lichen extracts. Envision the rhythmic work of dying vats simmering over open hearths, emitting soft floral scents. Feather pins used to fasten cloaks were carved from goose quills, their tips sharpened with stone tools. Each pin's slight curvature suggests careful shaping to follow the wearer's contours. Textile expert Dr. Marit Lear has reconstructed these garments, demonstrating their layered complexity. That complexity speaks to a culture that balanced practicality with aesthetic expression. A small iron lamp found near the stern once burned seal oil to illuminate cramped quarters. Imagine yourself peering into that lamp's flickering glow, the surrounding wood dancing with shadows. The lamp's wick holder bears faint inscriptions that may represent runic marks of ownership. Runologist Erik Halvorsen has proposed that these runes might record the craftsman's name. Such personal touches remind us that even in large communal endeavors, individual stories endure. Fragments of leather straps, still supple, testify to the experimental tanning methods of the time. The tannins from oak bark would have imparted a deep, earthy aroma to cured hides. As you inhale the preserved scent of these leathers, you connect with the sensory world of a Viking cook gathering firewood. A reconstructed hearth in the museum's experimental archaeology wing replicates those smoky tangs. Volunteers wearing replica clothing stoke that hearth, preparing porridge in ceramic pots. Their measured movements mirror the deliberate pace necessary to endure weeks at sea. In the adjacent wing, digital touchscreen displays allow you to explore cross-sections of the ship's hull. Interactive 3D models let you rotate the vessel and peer into hidden compartments once sealed by peat. These compartments housed reserve stores of salted meat, crucial for survival during unplanned delays. The process of salting preserved proteins but required careful monitoring to avoid spoilage. Historians estimate that a ship of this size could carry enough salted provisions to feed 60 men for 2 weeks. That calculation highlights the logistical challenges faced by a Viking cook aboard a cramped longship. Without modern insulation, supply crates would shift with sudden swells, spilling contents and forcing improvisation. Imagine a cook balancing on a heaving deck, ladling stew from that very cauldron while waves sloshed around you. The artifacts you now observe in glass cases once served under such precarious conditions. Each piece embodies a story of adaptation, endurance, and the quiet craftsmanship that underpinned every voyage. As you step back from the case, allow the stillness to settle, carrying with it insights into a world both distant and intimately human. Here in this silent gallery, history's puzzle pieces fit together through careful excavation and thoughtful interpretation. The legacy of the Oseberg ship lives on in these curated fragments, whispering of cooks, sailors, and ritual feasts long past. Trace the final motif etched on a small gaming piece and ponder what solace such diversions offered amid storm-tossed seas. A single glance at the preserved landscape of artifacts suffices to connect your modern reflection with ancient resilience. Beneath the museum's quiet hush, the Oseberg artifacts seem to hold their own breathing rhythms. You glide past gleaming cases, noticing how each shard of wood reflects light like buried secrets. The interplay of shadow and illumination creates a contemplative atmosphere, guiding your gaze from one relic to another. Ceramic fragments once part of household vessels bear imprints of braided cord where handles were tied. These modest items hint at everyday rituals far removed from chieftains' and jarls' banquets. Yet their simplicity offers profound insights into domestic routines on the longships themselves. In 2009, a re-examination of textile dyes revealed faint traces of saffron imported from the Islamic Caliphate. This discovery underscores a network of trade reaching across Europe and into distant lands. Imagine standing in that gallery, tracing the delicate red stains that once colored fine garments. A fresh analysis by the National Museum's Textile Conservation Unit in Oslo identified plant oils used for softening woven fabrics. Those oils, derived from flax and hemp, would have kept cloaks supple during soggy voyages. Nearby, an intricately carved bone comb rests on velvet padding, its teeth still largely intact. Microscopic inspection shows wear patterns where hair oils left glossy residues. The comb's design features stylized longships, a motif mirroring the very hull you observed earlier. Archaeologists like Dr. Kari Nymoen have interpreted such symbols as markers of identity, possibly clan emblems. A similarly decorated comb found at the Gokstad ship burial implies a shared visual language among elite Norse families. Notice how each discovery reframes your image of Viking material culture, blending utility and artistry. A small wooden bee smoker used to calm hives hints at beekeeping practices in Viking homesteads. Pollen grains from bluebell and yarrow, discovered on its interior walls, suggest honey played both culinary and medicinal roles. You might sense a gentle hum as though the vessel still echoes with soft buzzing. Nearby, a group of runic inscriptions carved on flat stones draws your attention. These stones, catalogued in the museum's archives, bear messages of ownership, protection, and devotion. Experts date the inscriptions to the 10th century, when runemaster Thorbjørn Skald engraved ritual verses. One inscription reads in Old Norse, "May the waves guide your soul," a poetic invocation for a safe afterlife. Feel the weight of those words as they hover above the artifacts, a whispered prayer across time. In 2012, epigrapher Helena Astad mapped these runes to similar carvings in Uppland, Sweden, revealing shared ritual texts among Scandinavian seafarers. Imagine the rune master's steady hand etching each letter by torchlight, pausing to let the metal cool. Adjacent, a fragment of a child's leather boot suggests younger members of society accompanied adults on journeys. The boot's tiny sole displays were consistent with uneven shorelines rather than smooth hall floors. Soil analysis detected traces of salt and clay, pointing to frequent beach landings. This small artifact invites you to ponder familial dynamics aboard longships where kinship mingled with exploration. A set of iron clasps and buckles once held heavy pelts around warriors' shoulders, now resting silently under glass. Conservation tests conducted in 2017 found that many metal fittings were coated in tar to resist corrosion. That tar, likely pine-derived, carried a pungent scent when first applied, sealing seams and joints. You can almost inhale a tinge of resin drifting from the chestnut-colored fittings. In a nearby hall, a looping video projection shows the original excavation site as it appeared in 1904. These grainy black and white photographs capture workers by lantern light, unearthing timbers with spade and pick. Digital restoration of these images reveals faded inscriptions on wooden planks that are now indecipherable. Scholars like Professor Thorbjørn Lunde have used photogrammetry to reconstruct those missing details. They call it archaeological resurrection, when a digital model recovers lost epigraphy. Consider the delicate balance between preserving physical artifacts and embracing digital surrogates for interpretation. A small niche displays fragments of a ceremonial horn, its spiraled shape inviting reflections on sound and ritual. Acoustic experiments in 2021 tested replicas in Norse mead halls to gauge resonance and volume. These horns, fashioned from oxen tusk and reinforced with copper bands, produced a clear, mournful call. Imagine that call echoing across misty fjords, signaling feasts or farewells. The luxury of sound served as a powerful form of communication in societies without written dispatch. Beneath the display, a label notes that some horns bear minute etchings of family crests. Such personalizing marks blur the line between communal ritual and individual expression. Moving onward, you encounter a meticulously reconstructed section of the ship's stern, complete with reproductions of missing planks. Here, curators demonstrate how 3D printing filled in gaps, using library-grade polymers to match wood density. This fusion of ancient craft and modern technology exemplifies heritage stewardship in the 21st century. As you pause before this hybrid display, allow a moment to appreciate the continuum of human ingenuity. The mysteries embedded in every artifact invite endless interpretation and reflection. A final glance at the wall-mounted map, tracing the Oseberg crew's possible routes, reminds you of voyages untold. You step away from the museum's calm embrace, carrying the knowledge that history remains a living dialogue between past and present. In the final gallery bay, you find yourself before a low display of small finds, each object framed like a page in an ancient ledger. The curated layout draws your eye from iron tools to delicate ornaments, inviting a slow, meditative pace. A pair of iron shears, rusted but still solid, reveals the seamstress's role in provisioning garments for long voyages. Metallurgical analysis published in 2020 by Dr. Einar Holm showed a high carbon content in those shears, indicating they held a keen edge suitable for cutting thick leather. Beside them, a tin whistle carved from bone hints at moments of quiet music aboard the ship, offering solace amid the salty spray. Experimental archaeologists at the University of Bergen recently replicated that whistle's tone, finding it produced a soft, haunting note when blown gently. Imagine yourself closing your eyes to hear that sound, drifting between past and present. A small glass bead, whose deep blue hue survives under protective lighting, tells of trade routes that reached Mediterranean workshops. Isotope analysis by Dr. Sophie Lindgren in 2022 traced the bead's origin to North African sands, underscoring Vikings' far-flung contacts. Trace residues of olive oil were found inside a clay amphora fragment, a rare find suggesting perishable goods also traveled these seas. You might sense a faint, fruity aroma if you lean close enough, an olfactory echo of distant groves. A coarse leather pouch, still stitched together by sinew, contained fragments of birch bark tar used for waterproofing hull seams. Conservation chemists in Trondheim identified betulin acids in that tar, affirming traditional birch burning methods. Let your fingers hover above its mount as you contemplate the craft knowledge encoded in such a simple container. Nearby, a runic board piece carved from whalebone features a single word, hle, meaning rest or shelter in Old Norse. Runologist Dr. Astrid Bergersen suggests this piece may have served as a talisman, invoking safety during storms. Picture a weary cook slipping this charm into a pocket before bracing against gale-force winds. An array of iron rivets displayed on a velvet strip bears subtle differences in head shape, each variation reflecting different workshop origins. Geometric mapping of rivet styles across Scandinavian shipyards is still ongoing, but preliminary findings hint at localized smithing traditions. Consider how even the smallest rivet carries the imprint of a craftsman's regional style. Beneath this strip, you discover a modest whetstone smear still speckled with iron filings. Laboratory tests have shown microtraces of salmon oil used as a lubricant, connecting sharpening rituals directly to food preparation. That intersection of culinary and martial maintenance speaks to the cook's dual responsibility, nourishing bodies and preserving blades. Let your mind drift over that synergy, recognizing the Viking cook's role as both caregiver and artisan. A nearby video kiosk invites you to explore LiDAR scans of the original excavation site, revealing subtle depressions in the landscape where peat was removed. These scans, conducted in 2019 by the Norwegian Institute for Cultural Heritage Research, help predict unexcavated mounds in surrounding fields. Imagine the possibility of new discoveries hidden under mossy turf, awaiting patient archaeologists. In the adjacent touchscreen exhibit, you rotate a 3D model of a burial bed headboard carved with interlaced dragons. The digital reconstruction created by Dr. Henrik Solberg in 2021 highlights minute tool marks that would otherwise remain invisible. Visualizing those grooves reinforces the connection between human hand and mythic imagery. A single fragment of woolen cloth displayed under magnification shows evidence of mosquito netting patterns woven into its weave. Entomological studies revealed sections of larvae casings, confirming awareness of insect pests even on open decks. Picture the cook swatting at buzzing flies while stirring a pot of gruel, details that bring daily life into sharp relief. On a low pedestal, an intricate silver arm ring catches stray light, glinting like a frozen wave. The ring's spiral motif echoes the ship's curved lines, suggesting aesthetic continuity between jewelry and hull design. X-ray diffraction analysis confirmed that the silver originated from Iberian sources, testament to exchange networks spanning continents. Let that realization sweep over you like a gentle tide. Nearby, a fragment of a bone comb inscribed with runes reading Frider, meaning peace, offers a counterpart to the hle board piece. The dual invocation of rest and peace weaves a narrative of spiritual solace amid the practicalities of seafaring. Consider how these charms complemented the cook's efforts to sustain both body and spirit. A small iron key, corroded but intact, once opened a wooden chest containing ritual paraphernalia. The chest's contents remain a matter of conjecture, but archival photographs show fragments of a horn cup and a leather-bound pouch. Photogrammetric analysis by the National Museum in 2023 allowed curators to virtually reconstruct the chest ES interior arrangement. You might feel a quiet thrill at the thought of peering inside through a digital lens, bridging centuries with interactive technology. A final exhibit case holds 3 carved gaming pieces shaped like ships, each balanced on its curved hull. Experimental play sessions with these pieces suggest they formed part of a strategy game, simulating naval maneuvers. Imagine the cook joining warriors in friendly contests during rare lulls at sea, the click of bone against wood marking fleeting moments of camaraderie. The Oseberg artifacts in this concluding section emphasize small-scale interactions as much as grand burial rituals. By focusing on everyday implements and personal charms, the display reminds you of the individual hands that shaped Viking life. Let these objects guide your thoughts to the quiet persistence of human creativity across time. As you step back, the gallery's soft lighting and hushed ambience encourage a gentle exhale. You carry with you the subtle resonance of shears, whistles, and beads, each object a whisper from the deep past. The mysteries of Oseberg endure not only in monumental timbers, but in these intimate fragments of lived experience. Imagine yourself stepping into the Jarl's great hall, where the door clatters shut behind you and a soft glow dances across rough-hewn timber. A long, sturdy table stretches before you, carved with swirling knot patterns and set with bowls of polished wood that catch the firelight. You take in the scent of roasted boar, its skin crackling and releasing a warm perfume that mingles with the subtle spice of juniper berries. The hearth at one end of the hall radiates a gentle heat, and you sense its steady pulse as you move closer. A skald stands by the carved pillars, his deep voice humming ancient verses as he praises the Jarl's ancestors. You notice how every plank and beam seems to hold a story, a silent witness to countless feasts and solemn oaths. Bowls of smoky salmon line the table's edge, their oily flesh glistening like stained amber under the flickering flame. You imagine the thrill of anticipating those first bites, the tender fish falling apart on your tongue. The Jarl himself sits at the head, draped in a cloak of rich wool, trimmed with wolf fur, exuding quiet authority. His fingers drum a measured rhythm on the table's edge, guiding the hall's energy in unspoken language. Plates heaped with barley porridge, spiced with fresh herbs, sit near trays of honeyed mead. The mead's sweetness floats through the air, gentle and unhurried, brushing against your senses like a soft breeze. You witness warriors and chieftains taking their places, their heavy cloaks sliding off shoulders tensed for strength. Some bear ornate horns of drinking vessels, etched with serpents and leap wells. With each bend of a horn, pale foam spills over the rim, settling in curving ribbons down the wood. You sense the contrast between this feast and your own rough stew, where you toiled over rancid grains. A servant glides between the seats, offering platters of glazed boar cheeks and crisp rye flatbreads. The flatbreads crackle under curious fingers, releasing the faint aroma of hearthstones long cooled. A hush falls as the Jarl lifts his horn, his gaze sweeping the assembly in a measured arc. His toast is spoken in low tones, honoring gods and ancestors in the same breath. You catch fragments of his words, each syllable weighted with reverence and tempered strength. Across the hall, a child thrall watches wide-eyed, clutching a small goblet of watered-down mead. The child's awe mirrors your own, as though you both share a spark awakened by this spectacle. Servants in simple tunics attend to every detail, their movements precise and almost ritualistic. You observe how no gesture seems random. Each bowl placed, each horn offered, a deliberate act of respect. Trays of smoked venison arrive, the meat dark and fragrant, as if recalling the forest's silent morning. You imagine the knife slicing through muscle fibers, the clean cut revealing tender flesh beneath. Spiced turnips roasted in the embers give off an earthy sweetness that balances the richer flavors. You notice how laughter drifts softly around the chamber, not boisterous but warm and steady. A skald's guitar-like lyre hums briefly as he transitions between verses, adding a gentle echo to the moment. Bowls of thick cream rest beside shallow dishes of pickled cucumbers, their tartness a bright counterpoint. The Jarl's favorite goblet is handed in a quiet procession, its surface inlaid with silver and swirling patterns. When he sips, the mead touches his lips like a whispered secret, then retreats into glossy silence. Your own throat feels parched as you remember the coarse gruel you ladled on pitching decks. Flutes of fragrant wine from Byzantium arrive next, their deep red hue hinting at distant vineyards. The wine's warmth trails down your spine as you imagine the sunlit hills where those grapes ripened. Around the table, toasts begin to flow, each raising the hall's collective pulse in unhurried cadence. You appreciate the sense of order here, so unlike the chaos of tossing seas and crowing gulls. Platters of sweetened porridge made with barley, cream, and jammed berries glide past your vision. The jam glimmers with jewel-like brilliance, recalling summer's fleeting bloom. You recall how your own porridge was sullied by salt and scurvy's grey pallor. An ornate drinking horn carved with dragon motifs passes by, its carrier moving with silent confidence. The dragon's form seems to shift in the lamplight, as if alive and breathing. Plates of spiced apples roasted in hearth coals bring a gentle fragrance of autumn's first harvest. You imagine sinking your teeth into one, feeling the tender sweetness give way to crisp skin. The Jarl nods to his stewards, who bring forth a silver platter of dried fruits and nuts. The platter's intricate design catches stray sparks, sending reflections dancing across the low ceiling. You see how each morsel is offered with care, a silent promise of abundance and loyalty. The hall's warmth wraps around you, carrying the reassurance of hearth fires far from sea spray. You sense the rhythm of their lives here, measured, deliberate, woven into every exchange. When the Jarl speaks again, it is to praise the craftsmanship of the feast, his words flowing like gentle rivulets. You feel honored to witness this ceremony of plenty, even as your own rations were born of necessity. The echo of laughter softens, giving way to comfortable silence that carries its own richness. You realize that each plate, each cup, is not simply sustenance but a statement of power and unity. In this great hall, hunger is transformed into ritual, and every taste deepens the bond between ruler and retainer. You imagine how different your days at sea must have seemed, where every scrap counted and rivalry simmered beneath the surface. Here, rivalry has given way to celebration, and the clink of horns is a shared heartbeat rather than a challenge. You feel the steady pull of gratitude, a gentle tide that contrasts with the constant struggle on deck. As you stand at the threshold of this world, you carry with you the memory of lumpy stew and the promise of something richer. And in that realization you find a quiet comfort that will linger long after the last horn has been emptied. Imagine yourself stepping onto the raised platform where the Jarl's guests take their places, the long benches lined with pelts, offering a throne-like feel beneath your fingertips. The hearth crackles behind you, sending a flicker of shadow across the woven tapestries that depict past victories and ocean voyages. You notice how each bench rises a notch above the last, reflecting a silent order of rank that governs every gesture here. The air is laced with the scent of spiced cabbage and smoked eel, layers of aroma that speak of distant markets and bustling ports. Imagine that with every measured clink of horn, you feel the gravity of lineage woven into this ritual of plenty. On the lowest benches you glimpse the thralls, hands calloused from labor, eyes respectful, and minds silent as they watch the proceedings. Beyond them, the freeholders sit in sturdy leather tunics, their laughter restrained by courtesy and the watchful gaze of the Jarl. At the very apex, the chieftains rest on carved stools, their cloaks shimmering with dyed wools imported from far-off shores. You can almost taste the tension in the air, an invisible thread linking each guest to the central figure of authority. As a servant moves purposefully between benches, you see how the smaller bowls of porridge give way to larger platters of sliced boar and fist-sized salmon fillets. The salmon, cured over alder smoke, gleams like fine metal in your memory, its texture firmer than any fish you have known. You recall the bowels of rancid fish you once chopped and feel a pang of disbelief at this luxury. A small cluster of men lean forward as a barrel of foreign spices is wheeled in, bright saffron threads and cracked peppercorns spilling their promise. You envision the caravan paths these spices traversed, winding through deserts and mountain passes to reach this secluded hall. With each dusting of spice, the boar's crackling skin takes on a tapestry of exotic warmth. The chieftains exchange nods of silent agreement, choosing cuts by subtle glances rather than words. You sense the unspoken negotiation playing out at every shift of plates, each morsel signaling favor or disfavor. Thralls carry wooden trays heavy with salted cod, a humble offering that underscores their place in this hierarchy. You know from your own struggles at sea that salt could preserve life, but here it serves as a reminder of boundary. The Jarl's stewards present a small side dish of crushed fennel seeds, their aroma bright and herby, slicing through the smoky backdrop. You imagine your taste buds awakening to that clear, sharp note, so unlike the dull gruel you once rendered. As the Jarl lifts his horn to speak, the room hushes in anticipation, the sagas woven into stone seeming to lean closer. Beneath the carved runes overhead, his words drift out, praising loyalty as the highest spice of all. You feel the power of those words settle around you like a well-worn cloak. On the benches, the thralls' faces brighten at the rare acknowledgement, though their seating remains unmoved. Beyond them, freeholders shift in their spots, mindful of protocol, yet warmed by inclusion. The chieftains toast in solemn unison, their horns raised high in an arc that seems to bridge hearth and heavens. When the horn empties, they tap it lightly against the table's edge, a percussive punctuation to their pledge. A servant then unfurls a bolt of white linen to wipe the rims, a gesture that reiterates order in every fold. You note the contrast with your own pathetically basic cloth once used to scoop cold broth. Next arrives a platter of spiced lamb from the Jarl's own pastures, tender and perfumed with caraway seeds. You close your eyes and imagine how each cut melts beneath gentle heat, releasing a soft sigh of succulence. A keeper of the banquets pries open a small jar of coriander paste, its cool greenness a striking counter from the north. You realize how these additions transform simple meat into a narrative of trade and prestige. The thralls glance covetously at the spreads, their own rations tucked away for later toil. Freeholders pick at the edges of dishes, careful not to overreach and offend the unspoken contract. Chieftains deliberate quietly over who merits the prime rib, the flesh carved with ceremonial precision. You picture the blade sliding through sinew, the red core revealed like dawn's first light. The Jarl's gaze flickers to the carved head of the boar on the table, a silent emblem of his dominion. Guests drink deeply, the mead's warmth spreading through arms and backs in languid waves. You recognize the subtle artistry in the seating plan, each sip an act of bond strengthening. Outside, drifts of smoke from the cooking fires blend into the night sky, a whispered signal of unity. You think back to the mast-high chimneys on your ship, belching acrid fumes unchecked by ceremony. Here, smoke is tamed and directed, part of a choreography that uplifts each honored guest. A thrall hands out bowls of stew, thickened with ale and root vegetables, a humble print of solidarity. It sits in front of the workers like a balm, acknowledging their sweat without threatening status. Above the benches, tapestries ripple in draught, echoes of distant trade winds captured in wool. You feel the pulse of the room as a living tapestry, each person a thread in a grand design. When the Jarl raises his hand, conversation stills like a curtain falling, and all present lean in. His words remind them that this feast is not for eating alone, but for weaving society's fabric tighter. In that moment, you understand how every bite, every spice, every seating choice mirrors the broader weave of Viking order. And though your own days were marked by scarcity and struggle, you see here a different kind of battle, the quiet contest for honor. As you stand at the edge of this scene, you take a final breath of spiced air and carry with you the resonance of prestige. You know that back on deck, your modest offerings could never compete, but here they underscore the chasm that separates cook from chieftain, and in that knowledge you discover the true weight of power served not just on plates but in every gesture of placement. Imagine yourself seated just off the main table, where the tapestry of voices hums at a low, respectful volume. The benches here are narrower, draped in sheepskins rubbed soft by countless gatherings. You feel a subtle vibration in the wood beneath you, the pulse of tradition meeting the quiet creak of oak. Soft candlelight pools in the center of each plank, revealing delicate chips of grain and the faint outline of carved runes. A servant quietly passes by with a small bowl of fish broth, its steam rising in a gentle haze. You inhale the smoky sweetness of alderwood, mingled with the broth's muted saltiness. Your lips brush the rim of the bowl and you taste a hint of dill, bright and crisp against the warm base. Around you, the freeholders lean forward in low conversation, sharing stories of winter hunts and spring planting. You catch fragments of their words, painting scenes of snow-laden forests and the promise of green fields. Their laughter is contained, like water held in a shallow creek before it meets the rapids. You notice the rhythmic flow of the feast, each course arriving in its own deliberate cadence. A tray of lamb kebabs comes into view, the meat threaded on sharpened bone and charred just enough. You imagine how the heat from glowing embers kissed the flesh, sealing in juices that ripple with flavor. The skewers are paused mid-air as the Jarl's steward nods to his master, awaiting instruction. When the nod comes, the kebabs are distributed, 2 to each noble's plate, a gesture of shared abundance. You observe how the freeholders bow their heads ever so slightly, a muted thank you for the Jarl's grace. In the corners of the hall, thralls watch with steady eyes, permitted to observe but never to partake. The air thickens with anticipation as the next dish approaches. Honey-glazed carrots roasted on a spit. Their exterior glistens like polished amber, and a faint clink resonates as they collide with the wooden platter. You imagine the crisp snap under your teeth and the sweet warmth that follows. At the same moment, fine mead is poured into horns carved from mastodon tusks, each horn a work of artistry. You feel the smooth curve of the horn in your hand, the wood polish worn by countless toasts. You bring the horn to your lips and taste bubbles of gold, the mead's essence lingering like a soft echo. Across the table, a freeholder raises his horn in salute, his eyes a reflection of the flickering flame. You sense the silent exchange of respect that flows between them, an unspoken contract of loyalty. A pause falls as the skald begins a low recitation of lineage, his voice weaving names into an invisible tapestry. The bench beneath you vibrates slightly with the resonance of his baritone, grounding you in the moment. When his verses end, a hush follows, as if the hall itself holds its breath in reverence. Another tray emerges, heavy with slices of roast boar rubbed in crushed juniper berries. The berries' piney scent lingers long after the platter has passed, a deep undercurrent of forest whispers. You recall the acrid tang of rancid fat you once dealt with at sea and feel gratitude for this refined preparation. Freeholders dig in with quiet ceremony, using simple bone knives edged smooth by time. You watch the blade slice through tender flesh, the cut clean and unresisted. Each bite seems to draw the room into a deeper bond, the shared feast a tapestry of tastes and alliances. A thrall moves near to refill the mead, his presence almost invisible in the subdued lighting. You imagine his own world outside these walls, a life dictated by the ebb and flow of daily tasks. The Jarl leans forward, his broad shoulders a silent instrument of attention. He addresses his guests in measured tones, praising craftsmanship as much as courage. You feel his words settle like gentle snow across the hall, softening edges and uniting purpose. Bowls of spiced turnip stew appear suddenly, their pale contents steaming against the glow. You taste the earthiness of the turnip, tempered by a whisper of caraway seed. The turnip's sweetness balances the richer flavors, a reminder of seasons shifting beneath the soil. Around you, the conversation resumes, hushed but filled with warmth that resonates like soft bells. A large platter of fresh berries arrives, their jewel colors a bright finale to the savory parade. You pick a deep purple berry and let it rest on your tongue. Its tart sweetness sparks a gentle shiver. The berries seem to close the feast in a poetic flourish, a current of natural rhythm and renewal. When the last berry is sampled, a final horn of mead is poured, its foam settling like a pale cloud. You feel a sense of culmination, the ritual complete, yet leaving room for reflective silence. The Jarl's stewards begin the quiet clearing of plates, as though a calm tide receding from the shore. Each clink of bowl and horn carries a soft resonance, echoing in the hall's ample space. You rise from the bench, your muscles eased by the gentle warmth that now fills you. Imagine yourself stepping away from the communal feast, the glow of candlelight guiding your path. You leave with the memory of honeyed flesh and aromatic stews lingering in the air. In that memory, you carry the contrast between scarcity and plenty, between the cook's toil and the noble's ceremony. That contrast will remain with you long after the hearth fires have dimmed. Imagine yourself wandering down the shadowed corridor that leads from the great hall to the Jarl Hay's private chambers, the walls lined with shields bearing intricate emblems. The floor beneath your boots is worn smooth by countless footfalls, each groove a testament to the many who have passed this way. Tapers set in iron sconces cast a gentle radiance across polished shields and tapestries, depicting seaborne conquests. As you walk, you sense the hush that envelops this secluded passage, a stark contrast to the vibrant noise of the feast behind you. Picture yourself pausing before a heavy oak door bound with iron straps, its surface etched with symbols of protection and power. The door swings open with a soft creak, revealing a chamber warmed by a low-burning brazier. A plush fur rug covers the floor, its pile deep and welcoming underfoot. You take in a breath of perfumed air, scented with lavender and the faint tang of cured meats stored in wooden chests. You notice vessels of fine oils arranged on a carved shelf, each bottle's stopper topped with a small carved animal figure. A low bench stands along one wall, draped in velvet dyed with deep crimson, the color of ripened berries. Place yourself by the brazier, where heat radiates in slow waves that press against your cheeks and soothe your bones. You feel the subtle pulse of authority that lingers in this room, as if the very stones are imbued with the Jarl's will. On a central table, platters of dried fruits and honey loaves await, delicately arranged like jewels in a crown. Each loaf glistens with a sheen of thick syrup, flecked with bits of crushed nuts that add gentle texture. You pick up a slice and taste the warm sweetness, the sugar melting on your tongue like sunlight filtering through morning mist. Beside the platter rests a small bowl of crushed herbs, mint, thyme, and a hint of heather, offering a refreshing counterpoint. You lean closer to inhale the aromatic blend, finding comfort in its crisp green brightness. A basket of rolled textiles stands waiting, layers of linen and wool in tones of muted gold and forest green. You imagine the Jarl selecting a garment from this collection, draping it across his broad shoulders like a second skin. The quiet here is punctuated only by the occasional crackle of ember and the distant murmur of guards on patrol. Feel the solidity of the walls around you, their thick timbers a bulwark against the chill night beyond. You notice the way the brazier's glow reflects off a small, polished shield hanging above a carved chest. Its surface bears an image of intertwined wolves, forever locked in silent embrace. You recall the wolves that once roamed the forests near the ship's camp, their howls echoing through the dark. Here, their symbol feels tamed by craftsmanship and ritual. Picture yourself turning toward a low writing desk where bird quills rest by ink pots filled with dark, rich pigment. Scrolls lie unfurled, their delicate scripts detailing laws, lineage, and alliances. You trace the calligraphy with your eyes, noting the careful curvature of each rune-like letter. The words speak of honor owed, debts remembered, and bonds sealed by blood and promise. You feel the weight of those obligations settle around you like a sober cloak. A small servant enters, carrying a flagon of spiced wine, a muted purple elixir that seems to shimmer in the brazier's glow. He pours a measure into a simple clay cup and offers it with a bow. You accept the cup and feel its cool weight in your palm before lifting it to your mouth. The wine's warmth spreads through your chest, gentle and unhurried, like a secret comfort. In the corner, an ornate cabinet stands open, revealing rows of carved drinking horns waiting to be polished. Each horn bears a unique carving: serpents, ravens, longships, echoes of myth and memory. You imagine the Jarl's hand wrapping around one of these horns, fingers tracing familiar grooves as he offers a toast. Outside the small window, you glimpse moonlight silvery on stone, as though the night itself were draped in fine metal. You notice how distant waves of laughter from the hall drift through the corridor, softened by stone and timber. That laughter, once clattering like dishes, now feels muted, intimate, reduced to a gentle hum. You stand and move to a nearby chest, where furs of sable and wolf lie folded like silent guardians. You lift one and feel its weight, the fur's underlayer soft and its guard hairs coarse yet reassuring. You drape it across your shoulders and sense how warmth and status intertwine in a single garment. In this room, every object is both functional and symbolic, a testament to life beyond the battlefield and deck. The brazier's embers shift, sending a cascade of shadows that dance across the carved beams overhead. You settle onto the fur, cup still in hand, and allow the quiet to envelop you. This solitude offers a stark mirror to the chaos of scuttling rats below decks and the roar of cold waves. Here, serenity reigns, shaped by careful design and the Jarl's intent. You taste the final sip of wine, its sweet spice lingering like a distant memory. You set the cup down on a small table carved with knotwork, its surface worn smooth by repeated use. A last flicker from the brazier reveals a small brazier tool set, tongs, a shovel, and a poker, all laid in precise order. The tools glint softly, reminders of the fire's maintenance and the constant vigilance required to keep warmth alive. You exhale slowly and rise, slipping the fur from your shoulders and placing it back in the chest. Stepping back through the oak door, you carry with you the hush of privilege and the echo of a world apart. The corridor's shadows welcome you once more as you return toward the hall, ready to rejoin the tapestry of voices and feasting that await. Imagine yourself stepping back into the glow of the great hall, where the embers of the hearth have settled into a soft, red hum. A final tray of spiced barley porridge is sliding across the table, its steam curling like whispered farewells. Gentle footsteps echo as servants clear the last of the bowls, moving with a calm precision born of repeated ritual. You breathe in the lingering scent of caraway and roasted boar fat, a memory you will carry long after the hall grows quiet. The Jarl rises, his broad silhouette framed by the hearth's glow, and you sense the weight of his gaze as it moves over his guests. His voice carries across the hall in steady tones, offering thanks to those who served and those who shared in the feast. As horns are raised one final time, the mead within each vessel seems to settle like golden calm. The nobles incline their heads in silent acknowledgement, each movement a deliberate echo of respect. You notice how every gesture here is steeped in meaning, from the way cups are held to the arc of a bow. Outside, the wind sweeps across the wooden rafters, carrying with it the distant crash of waves against a rocky shore. The contrast between this warmth and the bitter chill of the open deck is as stark as night and day. You remember the rancid stew you once ladled for hungry warriors, its smell clinging to your clothes like an unwanted companion. Here, the aroma of spiced mead and honeyed fruits weaves a comforting tapestry that drapes over every guest. You reflect on the difference between necessity and ceremony, how scarcity can drive survival, while plenty can forge alliances. Small clusters of laughter begin to ripple through the benches, soft as a breeze through birch branches. A skald steps forward to recite a closing verse, his voice low and measured like a slow tide retreating. You can almost hear the words echoing against ancient stone, weaving a final note of unity. A child thrall clutching a small bowl of barley porridge watches wide-eyed as the nobles stand. You feel a quiet swell of empathy, understanding the gulf between that child's world and your own memories of deck life. The Jarl gestures to the assembled thralls, granting them a moment to dine in the hall's fading warmth. Their hesitation gives way to cautious gratitude, and you sense the fragile hope wrapped in their bowed heads. Freeholders extend cups of leftover mead toward thralls, an unexpected gesture of communal sharing. The simple act transforms the hall, if only briefly, into a space of shared humanity. You consider how on the ship you once knew, such a gesture might have been unthinkable. The tension between cook and chieftain, between necessity and luxury, dissolves in that gentle exchange. A final horn is offered to the Jarl, its wood polished to a reflective gleam. He raises it in triumph, the foam inside shimmering like a pale sunlit wave. You sensed the solidity of his authority in that single motion, the quiet force that binds this community. Plates are gathered, horns emptied, and the hall empties in a steady, unhurried procession. You step back, leaving behind the tapestry of voices and flames, feeling how the hall's heartbeat slows. The candles gutter low, their light shrinking until only the embers remain. You feel a gentle hush settle over the space, as though the hall itself exhales. Outside, a guard extinguishes the torch at the entrance, sealing the warmth within. You imagine the cold night pressing against the thick doors, held at bay by thick wood and iron. As you walk down the empty benches, your fingers brush the grain of the table. You sense the countless hands that have polished these surfaces before yours. The wood's cool smoothness stands in quiet contrast to the rough planks of a ship's deck. You pause at the threshold, glancing back at the darkened hall one last time. The hush is so complete that you can hear your own breath, steady and unobtrusive. You carry with you an echo of the feast's warmth, a soft glow in your chest. The rhythm of their lives, so measured and symbolic, remains imprinted in your mind. You feel gratitude for the simple bowl of porridge you will warm tomorrow at sea. Its modest comfort now seems a gift compared to the ceremony you have just witnessed. You step onto the path leading toward the longship, where lanterns sway in the ocean breeze. Behind you, the great hall fades into silhouette, its stories sealed within timber walls. Your footsteps patter against the stones, marking a return to reality. Yet in your heart, you carry the resonance of feasting with the Jarl, an experience of plenty, power, and ritual. The memory lingers as a gentle reminder of how social order shapes every moment. You inhale the cool night air, tasting its sharp clarity on your tongue. Ahead lies the salt-sprayed deck, the bilge smell, and the cook's kettles waiting to be lit once more. You close your eyes for a moment and let the memory wash over you like a warm tide. In that recollection, you understand the true distance between cook's toil and feast's pageantry. When you open your eyes, you carry with you both worlds, the scarcity of the galley and the abundance of the hall. And with that knowledge, you are richer in experience even as you return to simpler fare. If you haven't yet fallen asleep, leave a comment so I know who stayed awake longer than I have. Take a moment to let the contrasts settle, the roar of the hearth against the crash of waves, the luxury of spices against the sting of salt. Remember that these stories, while distant in time, mirror our own searches for comfort and connection. As you drift, imagine your modern home's warmth wrapping around you more gently than any fur cloak. Let the memory of alleyed benches and running tides fade into the background of your mind. Rest now in the quiet knowledge that history's grand banquet and the simplest porridge share a common thread, the human need for nourishment and belonging. May that thought carry you into a peaceful slumber,